Join. Hello, happy Tuesday, everybody. Last day of June, June 30th, almost to July. Incredible. I am hopping on today just to do a little tea industry update, a little bit of news coming out, some very controversial news. So I'm sure once I share that news and give some background information, it'll get a discussion going. It's pretty juicy article I found last night. Hope everybody's feeling well. Again, this morning I was a part of an incredible discussion involving several very experienced uh, women of the Chinese tea industry. We had a lot of great things to say. Hi, Marco. Good to see you. I'm talking about some pretty controversial politics between India and China. It's interesting. I was talking to another friend, a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, I'll be honest about this friend. A lot of conspiracy. Yes, it was a wonderful talk earlier today, and I look forward to continuing that talk. But yeah, I was talking with a friend, and he was giving me his opinion that our next world war is going to be started between China and India. And anybody who keeps up with international politics will be familiar with that conflict, as well as anybody who travels to those areas and sees kind of the dynamic. Especially like Arunachal Pradesh, which is the state of India. It's the only state of India that directly borders China. And there's tea there. There's ancient tea there. There's wild ancient tea that no one likes to talk about because it totally downplays the story that tea, came from China. But yeah, the ethnic minorities in the mountains there in Arunachal Pradesh remind me very much of the ethnic minorities that you encounter in Yunnan. You feel like you're in Yunnan when you're there. It's literally, 10 kilometers on the other side of the mountain. And I've been there a couple of times, and going there was always a challenge. It was always like, why do they need my passport? Why do I need to get this special visa to go to this state? And after visiting there and seeing how it is, I've realized that it is a heavily conflicted area, and the local people are out of it. Like they're not even in it. It's the government sending their troops to protect that border because it's the only physical border between the two countries. And here and there, you'll see articles come out that talk about that conflict, and it's scary. Two countries that have such a political resentment towards each other. And today's tea industry article that I'll be speaking on plays on that. It's a very fascinating story that was shared through one of the tea planters groups that I'm a part of on Facebook. Always a great source of articles, especially from like the Indian newspapers, or Chinese newspapers, all of them in general. So this was in the Federal, which is an Indian online newspaper. And the title is Darjeeling Tea Gardens Sell Off Deal Brews Fear of Chinese Takeover. Hi, Michelle. Good to see you. Can't wait to chat with you. You owe me an email about that. Okay, so the article, I shared it on Tealit's Facebook last night. So if you want the link, actually, I'll put it into the comments. If you want to go read it yourself, the link is here. Please go read it. It's a pretty good article. I'll condense it down and talk about it, and actually want to do a little like extra research on top of what's stated in the article. Supposedly, this is news to me. Foreign investors can invest into Indian tea gardens. In past research that I've done, had been under the assumption that it was illegal for any type of foreign entity to own an Indian business. But I guess, times change, rules change. So they do welcome foreign investment. But in the case of this situation, the government does have the power to block the exchange of those tea board licenses from, company to company, especially if the government doesn't like those investors. And in the case of this article, it comes down to at the core of these deals that are currently under review by the government. So the government is currently reviewing these investment deals, which this is obviously a reaction not only to pandemic, but to the instability of the tea industry, especially in Darjeeling, but this is happening all across India. So they want the, oh dear, they want the, getting an important phone call right now. Have him text me. They need some capital to keep going. So your option is to divest some of your holdings. So in these cases, these are all large tea garden holding companies. So there's two in question here. One of them is called Alchemist Group, and the other one is the Ambudia Group. Which Ambudia is a famous tea garden of Darjeeling that has converted to organic agriculture and has developed prestige and has started to acquire other tea gardens, not only in Darjeeling, but as well as Assam. And I've tried to do some research to find out exactly how many tea gardens are in both of these holdings. I haven't been able to find that out exactly. So anybody that's watching this that knows about those two groups, if you know exactly how many gardens are held by those groups. That was something that surprised me when I first started going to India and learning about the Indian tea industry, is that there are, these like behemoth companies that, just gobble up all the gardens. And in addition to gardening and like producing tea as a tea garden, these companies will also behave as traders. So they'll be going to the auctions and, buying the teas and exporting them and trading them. And that's actually where the money is. So, that's kind of the trend of where it's going. Why it would be optimal for one of these holding groups to divest their gardens is that the gardens are not profitable, but the trading business is extremely profitable, especially when you work in an opaque commodity system where the value of the product is more attached to the name and the brand than it is to the product itself, which means that these large buyers, these large brokers have a lot of negotiation power in driving the prices down of the tea. And so that's where the money is, the arbitrage right there. You can buy it at $1.50 and sell it at $5. Like, that's a pretty good deal. And so that's where a lot of these companies are kind of veering towards. The only one example that I know definitely that I learned this was the family of Gopahara and Rohini. I was very surprised to learn that they are major brokers. And that was like personally a little heartbreaking for me because that group was the first family to apply to work with us. And I was promoting their garden, I was promoting their stories, I was importing their tea, paying a very premium price for their tea and not negotiating on that price. And then when I went to go visit their gardens and ask them questions, I wasn't getting full honesty and was actually kind of insulted, that I didn't negotiate. They said, yeah, everybody negotiates. So that's why we don't think you're going to stay in business because you don't negotiate. I was like, all right, we can't work together anymore. That's not what this is about. But, come to find out that like most of their business is actually coming from trading and brokering versus their own production. So you're going to see a lot of this happening of divestment of the tea gardens and then eventually, shutdown of the tea gardens. And that has started as well. And that's what's kind of fueling this like new movement of small tea growers. Who are like the local people that remain on the land after these holding companies or foreign companies lose interest in trying to revive the tea production business. Back to the article. There are 3 gardens, all Darjeeling. There are 3 gardens within those 2 different holding groups. that are, trying to. So that's 6 gardens total that are trying to be sold, and it turns out that like the direct buyers, like the direct entities that want to purchase and acquire these gardens are either from Singapore or they're from Hong Kong. But if you dig even deeper, you find that the investors of all of those initiatives are Chinese, and so that's where the politics comes in. That there's a fear of a Chinese takeover if these acquisitions happen. Um, and that all reminds me of that experience of going to Arunachal and seeing how contested that land is. I can only imagine, how contested the politics are, how contested, even the resources. And, China is such a huge market. If they were to own their own supplies, um, as far as tea coming from India, it would be very, optimal for them. I always thought that, Indian tea has a very strong place in the Chinese tea market. I don't know if the, big business that would come and do it would necessarily be the type of business that I think would be good for the Indian tea industry, because they would probably just want to be doing, very low quality mass production versus, artisanal production. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these companies want to come in and make very high quality products at these gardens. Who knows? So, so it's the Alchemist Group is in talks with the Hong Kong-based company. And these gardens, at least for these from the Alchemist Group, they've all been abandoned since 2017. So they're not active gardens. Um, but I looked into this Alchemist Group. They're a big company. They do a lot of things. They do food processing, and within that they have, well, it's mostly chicken. Um, the road building, information technology, healthcare, hospitality, pharmaceuticals, and steel. So these is like a large company. And it's weird because on their website, like tea is nowhere on here. So when they invested into the tea industry, I mean, this could have been, and I see. I don't know. It doesn't say here when those gardens were acquired by this Alchemist Group. Um, but they've been out of production, and so yeah, they're ready to divest, and they would probably want to divest to anybody and everybody. So this company from Hong Kong, but the Indian government's not going to like that because they're interpreting that this is an attempt by Chinese business to infiltrate into India. Um, of course, no one from these companies has directly commented. Well, Sanjay Bansal from Bhutia Group, which yeah, I've done some research on him. He's actually very well known. He was the one known for converting their garden to organic and doing a lot of the advocacy work for the other gardens in the Darjeeling area to convert over as well. And not just to organic, but also to like, biodiverse systems, which we all know are the best, at least for tea. Well, no, for everything. I think I could simply make that claim. Biodiversity is best for everything, not just tea. Huh, Rita? I think that's what Eric wanted to call the tea drinking. I don't know, what is it? It's an antelope. What do you call that thing? If you look at it in great detail, it's very odd. It has 2 different types of horns. Has 2 different types of arms. See, like one arm has a big hand, and the other arm is like a chicken hand. And then 2 different legs, like a dragon leg and a horse leg. I don't know. I think Eric Glass wanted to call it Rita. I just love how he's drinking his tea. Like he's got the biggest cup, and he's just like, I got nothing better to do than sit and drink my tea. Anyway. Okay, so I guess, yeah, Sanjay Bansal had something to say. Of course, what he had to say. I don't talk to strangers. That's what he told the media. So yeah, I mean, obviously this is so controversial that the companies themselves don't really want to speak on the issues. And they are talking with a Singapore-based company that allegedly has links to Chinese investors. So at this point, it is all just allegation and rumor, but it's still pretty serious. And that's why I wanted to talk about today, like not because I have an opinion one way or another, but the fact that this article was written in this way, really shows a lot about the dynamic between the Indian and Chinese governments. Yeah. And then Ambuta, I went to their website to see which gardens that they have. Oh, here we go. It doesn't say the exact gardens, but they currently own, and this is from an article in Stir Tea and Coffee by Jane Pettigrew. They currently own 14 gardens in Darjeeling and 5 in Assam. That's how it works. Like all these different like famous tea estates, they own groups of gardens. Very much like this. But I guess 3 of them in Darjeeling, 3 of these 14 gardens, they're ready to go. The article doesn't say if those gardens are active or inactive or if, I don't know. But one thing the article does say is that all these gardens are located in the Chicken Neck corridor, which that was my first time to hear about that. The Chicken Neck corridor is right near Siliguri. I think it's like the lower elevation land that's very close to the Bagdogra airport, which is like the main airport that you land at to go to Siliguri before heading up into the mountains to Darjeeling. And there are a lot of tea gardens there. The land is very low elevation. It definitely doesn't seem organic. So it's possible that that's where these gardens are. But I'm sure we'll get more information about that as the story starts to unfold. So currently, the Indian government is reviewing these petitions for the sale of these tea gardens, and they can obviously deny it. That's the power of the Tea Board of India, is that they can decide if they want someone doing business or not doing business. Like legally, if you do not have your license from the Tea Board, you legally aren't supposed to be even selling any tea. You're legally not supposed to be producing any tea. And oftentimes these licenses are used as bargaining tools or as basically bullying of tea gardens. I mean, I just know that's the case of, the small tea growers that I've had experience interacting with in Darjeeling. They're trying to get their licenses and, get up to date and do things right. But things get held up. And who's in bed with each other is the Tea Board and the big established companies. Especially the ones that hold the power as the traders and the brokers. And so I think that's another reason why you see, not only is it the money, but it's also the power and the influence that you have as a trader. Because I think in India, those parties are the holding the most power and influence, are the traders and the brokers, definitely not the estate owners. And I've been seeing a lot of other articles about, kind of this fear of China acquiring everything. I mean, even here in the States, someone had shared an article about, I forget what industry it was. Oh, airlines. That airlines are starting to divest to Chinese companies, and that's worrying people. Well, let's see. Pull a more general article up about the Oh, that's nice. A natural reserve would solve China-India border fight, says scientists. Well, here's another article. The next article is World War III. New flashpoint emerges for China and India as anger grows. Uh, so now there's a naval war because of the border conflict. There's a trade war going on. There's a lot going on here, but I think I want to look at the positive article. I like being positive. A nature reserve would solve China-India border conflict. Well, yeah, and so this ultimately is usually, and this usually is, a conflict over resources. So, I think last time when I was there, whenever I was like trying to understand, I was with Rajan Barua. He was the one that took me up to Arunachal Pradesh, and I was asking him about the conflict, like why is there a conflict? Why is this happening? And the Chinese bought the Ironman Corporation. When was that, Michelle? I didn't know about that. I would have thought the Chinese, that'd be the last thing that the Chinese would be interested in. But yeah, I know, I think it's going to be a trend that we're going to see. And, rather than approaching these topics with anger and hate, which I think a lot of people do, that. And it leads to assumptions that can turn even more hateful. This particular friend that I was speaking to that thoroughly believes that World War III is going to happen as a conflict between China and India, also believes that, this current pandemic that we're in was a manufactured thing, like a biological warfare, which, maybe it is. I'm not trying to say yes or no, to those answers. What I do want to focus on is like, what are we dealing with now? Like, so here's the case now, let's focus on that. But, if China is in a position of immense power as far as like economic power, we only have ourselves to blame for that as part of the system. As part of the system that took advantage of low-cost labor and low-cost products to fill inside of our Walmarts, we kind of have ourselves to blame for that. Not fully to blame for it, but we are part of that system, basically. And, if we become angry and negative at that, then we're ultimately going to have to become angry and negative at ourselves as well, which is not going to be productive. So I think it's really important to have a little bit of empathy in the situation before immediately charging into anger that, the Chinese just want to take over everything. Maybe they do. That's what America did for so long. That's what, so many other societies did for so long. And it doesn't last forever, like that equilibrium ultimately ends up finding itself. So, but I mean, nothing wrong with keeping things in check, staying informed. That's why I'm talking about this right now. I'm not talking about this stuff right now to anger you guys. I'm talking about it to just let you know what's going on so you're not shocked because, there's some very strong evidence that there is some major resentment and fear and despise between these two countries that we would probably usually overlook, just assume, they're third world countries, which they are, but then they aren't. I think they both possess nuclear weapons. They both possess very high levels of information technology. But they also do both possess very, very large disparities in wealth and disparities in privilege. And so, who ultimately loses on that are those people. Like, where this border conflict is happening, like, those are, like, the quietest, most humble, gracious people just living their life. Everything made out of bamboo, just living their life, trying to stay focused on their communities. And there's, a war happening just down the road. over things that are, completely not connected to those people. So yeah, just one of those unfortunate things. I drink some tea. Time for some tea. So Michelle said that the Ironman Corporation was acquired a few years ago and that everyone was afraid when it first happened that it would change the dynamic, but nothing was noticeable. Right? I mean, that could end up being the case with all of this. All of these stories. The airplanes getting acquired, the tea gardens getting acquired is like, maybe they're not trying to change the system. They're just trying to, they're trying to develop themselves just as much as we're trying to develop ourselves. But we'll have to see. Ultimately, I think I don't know, I think a lot of things when it comes to China, it's such a complex subject. India too. There's so many different things within the range of culture differences, economic differences. We could find fear in that and perpetuate that fear, which is only going to backfire on us, really, ultimately, right? So, I don't know. I just think it's But yeah, that was one interesting thing that I learned in that article, that foreign investors, up to 100%, a foreign investor can buy up to 100% stake in a tea garden now. I always had a very different idea about that. If you guys excuse me for a second, I have to check a message that came through. So important thing about Las Vegas life, about the desert life here, is my AC unit at my house. So this is not my house. This is Tila. This is the warehouse in my tea room. The AC is working here, so I'm fine just here. But at my house, the AC went out a couple days ago, and that's a biggie. When that happens in the desert, that's a really big deal because it gets hot and it's hard to live. It's hard to be. And so the AC technicians are going to my house now to work on it. And my parents are there to receive them. So I just had to text them and tell them that we were all good to go. So AC is going to be back on. I can sleep comfortably in my house, not like sprawled out in front of a fan, trying to make it happen. So Michelle says that Ironman was purchased for $650 million. Who knew a race could create that much value? That is incredible. That's more than what Tivana was purchased for. Tivana was purchased for $640 million. So, man. But I guess, yeah, that's a strong brand and a very strong network of other brands that support it. So I guess it makes sense. Well, that's cool. I wonder if they've taken any of their events to China. Well, I'm sure there's probably events in China already. Okay, so I'm going to go back and read this article that I pulled up about the positive article about the conflict between China and India. Try to find the one. Okay, I'm just going to read this out loud. This is published in South China Morning Post. This is a very reputable Chinese news source written by Eduardo Baptista. Interesting name. And this published today. Oh, so it's brand spanking new news. So yeah, Michelle confirms that Ironman does do events in China. That makes sense. Hopefully not in any of the big cities. I couldn't imagine like having that much exercise strain with all the pollution. I definitely do an Ironman like in a mountainous area somewhere, but then where are you going to swim? I guess if there's like a big lake or something, you could swim. I don't know. My cousin's a professional surfer, and he goes to a surf competition in China every year. And he says the surf is great, but the environment is not good at all. He says the water is dirty, the air is dirty, it just looks dirty, feels dirty. But yeah, he says the breaks are nice. You know, so for a surfer, a lot of times that's all they care about. So yeah, I think that like there are very few pristine. No, I shouldn't say there's very few because there's a ton of them, but they're all like up in the mountains. You've got to get away, you know, get away from the city and the mountains, and then the land and the air can be very clean, crisp, beautiful, actually. China and India could resolve their deadly border conflict in the Himalayas by turning all the disputed areas into a natural reserve. This is a comical article. Yeah, that's cool. I wonder like when each of the leaders of the two respective countries read this, if they got a good laugh as well. He says that both India and China were building roads and other infrastructure that were destroying the flora and fauna in the Himalayan mountains range. He cites examples such as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a flagship in China's Belt and Road Initiative, according to Chinese Premier, as well as the Indian Border Roads Organization that began building a road close to the border with China in April 19. Analysts say the strategic implications of these infrastructure projects have irked both sides, distributed to the current conflict on the border, known as the Line of Actual Control. Oh, that's interesting. And mind you, this whole area is all tea lands. Like this was all like the migrant trail of the ethnic minorities, the migrant minorities that had traveled via Tibet or from Mongolia via Tibet into China, Laos, Thailand, and India. I know India oftentimes gets left off that list, but it's very important that, they did travel into that area. So all of this conflict area is ancient tea lands. So yeah, early this morning on our talk, we were talking about, the need of protecting ancient tea trees, and who knows what kind of destruction is happening in this conflict between the two countries. Analysts say the strategic implications of these infrastructure projects have irked both sides and contributed to the current conflict at the border. He wrote that neither side wanted war, and efforts from conservationists to establish nature preserves in the Himalayas should be considered as a possible diplomatic solution to the border conflicts. The Himalayas region, which includes Mount Everest, is home to endangered animals such as the snow leopard and musk deer, and stretches the musk deer. That's funny. Katsuri. So we have this tea, the Katsuri tea. It's a Darjeeling tea, but Katsuri is a Nepalese word. Darjeeling's all Nepal. And we received this tea, and the grower called it Katsuri, and I'm like, what does Katsuri mean? I need to tell our buyers why you named the tea this. And he didn't really know, or he didn't know how to translate it to me. So I googled it, and Katsuri means musk, deer musk. I'm like, deer musk, what's that? And so that's like a highly prized, like aromatic delicacy. It's like something that you'd reserve for like a gift. It's like frankincense, it's like a really highly valued smell, and it's extracted from the anus of these musk deer. So that's cool. We all want to smell like the butt of a deer. But that word katsuri, if you're in Nepal and use that word, it's a very high valued word. They're not thinking about the deer butts, but of course we do as Americans. We read it, we're like, what? It's coming from the butthole? Okay, anyway. His vision for a giant nature preserve would require the cooperation of all these nations. So it would include China, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bhutan. I'm going to pull up a map here to show this. This chicken neck. So related to this same story I was saying earlier, the news article from earlier about the acquisition of those tea gardens is the chicken neck is the thing that's in question. All right, so here we go. So this is the chicken neck, Siliguri corridor. Darjeeling is up here. Darjeeling and Sikkim is up here. So they're kind of divided in half, going up here in between Nepal and Bhutan. And then this is pretty much all of Assam. And then Arunachal Pradesh is all up here. So this whole area here. But so what the scientist is saying is that if this nature preserve is possible, they would need the coordination of all of these countries, including Bangladesh. They would all need to agree upon and, take care of this. It's interesting, how close everything is, and borders themselves too, right? And I think that's something that we, in our current time, should start trying to wrap our head around. Let's see this map. It's an interesting map. So Arunachal Pradesh is pretty much everything above this river. This big river right here is the Brahmaputra. It's I think it's the biggest river in Asia. It's huge, beautiful. And here's Guwahati, and then Dibrugarh is somewhere over here. And you cross the river. There's a big bridge there you can cross on your car. And then you're in the border area with China. But they protect that area well. I mean, it's a conflicted area, so you don't really want to get caught up in there undocumented or anything. So yeah, I hope that gives you guys a little bit of a reference point of what it's like there, and how all of this area, I mean, and going, this map doesn't really take you there, but you can see Burma is here. And then you would, if this map continued, you'd see that Yunnan. Here, why don't I just pull that up? So, how big China looks. Okay, so here's India. You zoom in. So here's Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, Darjeeling are up in here. Assam goes through all of here. And then Arunachal Pradesh is here. You see the border. It borders all the way up here into China, Tibet. Well, that's just China. But that's so funny. It's not. Where's the border with China, Tibet? It's here. So that's Tibet. So the only official border is here. But again, that's another thing about the borders, right? They're so fluid and flexible, and depending on whose politics make the map, they're going to put that border somewhere else. But this whole region, so there's Sichuan. I mean, this is all tea land, where the origins of tea are said to be. Yunnan here. And even into Burma, Laos, they say that there's old tea trees, ancient tea trees through all this area. I mean, these were migrant people, and that was one thing after I went to Arunachal Pradesh. I did quite a bit of research, and I have the intention of maybe not myself writing the book, but I definitely want to support a book to be written to tell the story of these migrant people and where that tea seed might have actually originally came from. Because when I was in Arunachal Pradesh and they showed me their tea, their old tea, their home tea as they called it, I asked them, how long have you been making this tea? They say, since the beginning of time, our family always done this. This is what we do. And I say, well, do you have stories or even folklore in your family of, where this came from? And they said, well, we do have the folklore of where we originated from, which was Mongolia. How long of a journey that is. Oh, here we go. Mongolia's here. So they're like, yeah. Came from Mongolia, and the tea seeds came from Tibet. That's what they said. So I think the pathway I think there's several different ones, and there's different like generations of migration. So it's really hard to pinpoint, oh, everybody came at this time via this path and they did this, and through those different generations evolved different cultures. And so as those cultures migrated, they established at different points. But I think the ethnic minority in Yunnan is like 1,000 years is what's kind of known for those folks. And those are like the original, those are like the original tea communities that we talk about. So if they were here like 1,000 years, and I think they were here in this area even sooner. But from what I've read, these guys settled into Arunachal Pradesh later, maybe only like 300 or 400 years ago. So, it's possible that the tea trees that they have aren't as old. I didn't get to go deep into the forest myself. They had sent some children out to go harvest the leaf. The leaf was definitely looking like it was coming from a big old tree. But a big old tree can be deceiving. Like, you may feel, oh, this tree must be so old, it's so big, and the tree itself is only like 100 years old. That happens. I'd seen even 10-year-old trees that I thought were hundreds of years old. It's only 10 years. So, there's a lot of factors that affect the size of a tree. I mean, really, if you want to see the age of a tree, you got to focus more on the like biodiversity that's been, developed on the tree over time. And also the girth of the trunk of the tree is another way to see the age. But but they say that they think the tea seeds came from Tibet because like from their family's lineage story, they came from Tibet, which is actually true. When I looked it up, the migrant pathway for the settlements into this area came through Tibet, and then they kind of turned in and settled here versus continuing on. I think everybody continued on. So, and maybe the seeds didn't come from Tibet. Maybe they did come, because a lot of people think that Sichuan is where it comes from, or like this area is where it comes from. And maybe they were passed back via Tibet to these settlers that came in. Regardless, I'm getting a little off subject. Point is, this conflict between China and India is right in the heart of ancient tea land. And that's relevant to us because we love tea. You wouldn't be here listening to me if you didn't love tea. I know I can be entertaining, but I'm not that entertaining. Hi, Jim. Yeah, Kona Ironman. I should do an Ironman. I've been like training a lot. So yeah, maybe I can get into it. It's always the bike ride that freaks me out though. I'm not good on bikes. I get nervous and shaky. Swims I can do. Long swims I can do. I love it. Especially like ocean swimming. The bike ride though freaks me out a little bit. All right, I'm going to jump back to this article. Did I finish it? No, I did not finish it. He says, I want to extend the discussion to the entire mountainous region of the Himalaya, the Trans-Himalaya and Hengduan Mountains in China, and the mountain ranges of Indo-Burmese region. Could you imagine if this could be... You've done 8 of them, Michelle? Oh my goodness. Well, you're super fit. Next time I come to Hawaii, maybe we can train together. I just gotta build confidence on the bike. I don't like going fast. I think that's it, right? And you're supposed to you're supposed to be like catching up on your time on the bike. So I get scared, at fast speeds, and I've had pretty bad, falls on bikes, especially going down mountains, and so I'm not usually very excited about going fast on the bike. I like my little beach cruiser. I think if I'm going to go on a bike ride, I just want to cruise. And you've done them all over the world. That's so cool. That is so cool. Yeah, I don't know about an Ironman. Maybe. I definitely think I could do the ride is easy, right? Everybody says it's the easiest part. That's like the part you catch up on your time. That's the part that I'm like the most anxious about. Um, yeah, I want to see that. I want to research. We keep talking about it. I want to be able to say how much is what. Okay, so it's a 2.4 mile swim. Okay. 112 mile ride, bike ride, and a marathon. Okay, so it does have a marathon in it. Dang. God, you must be pooped after you finish that, Michelle. Oh, that's incredible. Like, I know I could definitely hit that marathon. That's for sure. And maybe the swim. Yeah, I think I could do the swim. But that bike ride scares me. Because it's like a long distance. 114 miles? So like, it's a long distance. So you gotta go fast. I don't like going fast. So then he goes on to say that these are the three most critical global biodiversity hotspots of immense conservation significance and share millions of years of biotic exchanges. Chinese and Indian forces fought a war over the border in 1962, and smaller skirmishes and standoffs have happened since. This year, scuffles broke out between Chinese and Indian forces on May 5th and 6th on the northern shore of the Pangong River, a territory divided by the Sino-Indian border. The conflict is unusual in that no shots had reportedly been fired, in line with the previous agreement with the two sides. But brutal hand-to-hand fighting did take place at the Galwan River Valley, part of the Karakoram mountain range, with as many as 20 Indian soldiers killed, along with an undisclosed number of Chinese. The disputed border on the India side also falls into the territory of Kashmir, where several wars have been fought between India and Pakistan. And so this guy is from Kashmir, this biologist that's proposing this. Michelle, you're teasing me now. She says 112 miles on the bike is easy. I guess so. What the heck? I'll do it. I don't know when, but I'll do it. I gotta get a body of water to swim in, though. I don't even have a pool to swim in. I don't have ocean here. I'm in the middle of the desert. So yeah, the bike ride and the run, I could train on that. The run I've definitely been training on. That I do 10 miles every time I go out for a run. I just got to bump that up a couple more times, and I think I'll be ready for the marathon part. But the bike ride, I guess I can start. I got to get a special bike, right? One that goes fast for the 112 miles, because my beach cruiser not going to get me very far very fast. I'll be cruising like eating tacos, you know. Thank you for the levity in the middle of talking about this very intense subject, Michelle. So that's good. And who knew that the Iron Man could be a subject of levity? Only when you involve tacos, I guess. So he recalls developing an emotional connection to the Himalayas because it was the 24/7 overlooking my window. He'd go on to write many academic papers on the effects of deforestation, climate change, and dam construction in Himalayan ecology. Militarization, land use changes, and habit destruction and fragmentation across the Himalaya are likely to push several species with small populations to extinction. Diplomacy is their only hope. It is easy to visualize the kind of impact the military establishments can have in the ecological fragility. Satellite images confirm that Chinese forces have put up buildings on the Indian side of the Galwan River Valley. Both sides have deployed thousands of troops to the borders as tensions escalated. Pandit argued in his article that high-altitude areas such as the Galwan should be free of human interference. I think that's a great idea. Jim says, go with the 1 3-wheeler dog. can go to. Like three-wheeler as in like I'm imagining three-wheeler as like the little kids' little tricycle thing, you know. I could really cruise with that. So there are other places where people-free demarcation zones have helped wildlife recover. The most prominent example is in the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. A strip 4 kilometer wide and 248 kilometer long. It has not been a permanent human presence since the sign of the armistice after the Korean War in 1953. So that's good news, that there's a precedent of this working, you know, even in highly conflicted areas. The Korean DMZ is now a flourishing site for endangered animals such as the Asiatic black bears and red-crowned cranes, despite being sown with mines and hundreds of artillery and tanks facing off on either side of the border. So they can still fight each other, just, you know, farther away from each other. And all of that biodiversity can still flourish in between. But the Himalayan border region does not need mines to keep humans out. The mountains in extreme weather can do that. And that's true. You know, the Himalayas were the one place that the British were not able to easily colonize. And it was because of the rough terrain and the rough conditions that really only the local people that were accustomed to those conditions were able to survive and thrive there. The terrain poses a problem for both sides. It's the X factor. He said from September, temperatures in that area could drop as low as minus 55 degrees Celsius. This includes areas such as the Galwan Valley that is more than 4,000 meters above sea level. So yeah, this is a mountainous area. If both sides don't vacate those areas, the weather will eventually kill them. But analysts say the high altitude is precisely why China and India are squabbling over a border and what is most uninhabitable land. It's the highest point in the world. Missiles stationed in the region can target any point of the world. So here's the real reason. We just want to drink tea. He says that the reason the border dispute broke out was because India was trying to get the higher ground of the border currently occupied by the Chinese. The lack of oxygen at such altitudes was also a problem, citing the example of the recurring India-Pakistan conflicts. More people on both sides die every year of altitude sickness and other altitude-related or weather-related problems than direct combat. I didn't know that. So there's some interesting information. I'm not sure what it's worth starting a war over, considering that today we have all kinds of technical capabilities to be able to look over a particular hump on a mountain. That's funny. So that's all these like quotes in this article are like from a professor, like a history professor and a biology professor. So that's why kind of the context is kind of funny. He argues that geopolitical interests pale in comparison to the ecological importance of the Himalayas, noting that rivers from the region supply water to more than 1 billion people. So that's what I had heard, you know, about the resources, that they wanted to, like, you know, dam off certain water, you know, for their own good, depleting, you know, lots of people of their water. Declining to comment on which nation is most responsible for endangering this ecosystem, the conservationist says that all countries need to take responsibility to protect the region. What we need to remind the leaders of these 6 or 7 nations, and also those beyond, is that we live as long as Himalaya lives. So, yeah, that's good. And then there's a little video here. Maybe I'll play that. That'll be nice. I will play this video. Oh. Here we go. And I will post this article. I'll do this right now so you guys can see it. this was different than the first article. The first article I posted was specifically about the tea gardens that were in question. And the reason why I'm sharing this article is that they're related. This is giving a little bit of context of, why there is such a strong political dispute between these two countries. Beautiful.
目前中印边境地区的局势总体是稳定的、可控的。中印关于边界问题的外交、军事沟通渠道是畅通的。相信双方通过谈判协商，可以妥善解决两国之间的问题。
India is committed to the objective of maintenance of peace and tranquility in the border areas with China, and our armed forces scrupulously follow the consensus reached by our leaders and the guidance provided. At the same time, we remain firm in our resolve to ensuring India's sovereignty and national security.
Right, so yeah, that just kind of gave you some look on what's going on there. Pretty serious stuff. So that video seemed to have built some confidence that war is not necessarily on the horizon, but definitely room to be concerned. What do you guys think of that? And how do you think that this potential buyout of tea gardens in India, because the tea gardens of India are they may not be so powerful right now as far as profitable business, just because the industry is kind of locked into this immobilized commodity system. But it's pride. It's a big part of their GDP, of their economic development has been tea. And to let a country that has developed this, because that was kind of the vibe that I got when I heard about this conflict when I was there, when we went over to Uttar Pradesh, and I learned why we had to get special visas to go there and whatnot, is that the Indian people feel that they're being invaded. And in that article that I read, they tried to ask that professor, who do you think is responsible? And the professor was very diplomatic and saying, everybody needs to take responsibility, which is true. I mean, India itself needs to take responsibility too. All those borders, the borders between Kashmir and Bangladesh and Pakistan, that was all India's responsibility. How they set those borders and set everything up. And I think that those actions definitely affected this conflict and what's going on. But the immediate concern is that, yeah, the Chinese are like literally building infrastructure on land that isn't theirs, like slowly trying to creep up. That's something I heard happening in Yunnan and in Nanoshan in the tea mountains. I met the young couple from Eastern Leaves. They actually, the wife, she owns the land. She owns the lease. So yeah, Michelle, you're right. If a business wants to sell and they don't care who buys it, the money is there, they can. But in this situation, they cannot sell, or actually they could sell. Really, they could sell it. But if the government doesn't choose to exchange the tea board license to this new ownership, then that new ownership will never be able to produce any product. They won't be able to get any value out of that investment. So that's where, this is not just a decision between the seller and the buyer. There is some government intervention, and where the politics is going to come in. Are they going to deny it? That article that I shared didn't say one way or another. They just said it's currently under review. And that like other potential sales have never gone through that review process like this. And the only reason why is because it's speculated that at the core of these investments are Chinese investors. So yeah, they don't want that influence there. Yeah. Interesting stuff, right? Yeah, and I don't want us all thinking that it's just the pandemic that's caused this to happen. I mean, the margins and everything, just like with restaurants too, like a lot of restaurants are closing now, and a lot of them are citing, it's directly because of COVID, and it's like, was it? Like restaurants were dropping like fries they were dropping like flies even before the pandemic. So, there could be some validity to that as well. These businesses that are built upon very small margins, they're built upon very low wage labor, restaurants being part of that. It's a hard business model to sustain. So, yeah, this has been an interesting subject. This is probably like the most political I've gotten. I know I do like the Constitution stuff, but like for me, that's not politics. That's the opposite of politics, actually. It's like the framework of government. The politics is what, is the interpretation of that. And I'm never interpreting those things, but to talk on this, and this involves tea. It involves the tea world, the tea growing world, and, and especially these like ancient tea trees that are potentially there or not there. Who knows? There could be tea trees that are there that are just completely forgotten. We just didn't know. There were some migrant communities that passed through, planted some seeds, 800 years ago, and then they moved on, and those tea trees are still there. And in addition to those tea trees is all the seedlings. So that's something else to think about. When you think about the lineage of tea traveling, and this is even the case in a place that you would think most unlikely. So I'll tell the story of Hawaii. I have a couple people from Hawaii watching right now, so this will be relevant for them. There is, and I have seen it. I know it's true. I've tasted the tea from it. We probably will never see tea from it for a long while. But there is a tea tree on the Big Island of Hawaii that is at least 200 years old. And I think, where did that come from? How could a tea tree? And the land that it's on is retired sugarcane land, where several Chinese migrant workers were brought about 200 years ago to work those lands. And so it's very likely that when those folks were asked to get on the boat to go, realize their new life in America and Hawaii, well, actually it wasn't America just yet, it was in Hawaii, they brought some tea seeds with them because it was that important to them, and they planted those tea seeds. So there's this one big tree, and the people that own that land and possess that tree are, as of right now, currently not making tea from it and don't have an interest in doing that. But the person that had let me know about that, they actually don't own that land. They may be a caretaker there or something. That's how I got that information. He was telling me that in the mountain ridges above where this land is, oh, Michelle, you won't find it. It's not anywhere. It's undocumented. It's undocumented, and maybe you'll get lucky and meet those people. But yeah, they're not making tea. It's an old tree, but it's a Camellia sinensis tree, that's for sure. And it's old. I can taste it. The tea, of course, came to me moldy because the guy that made it didn't know how to make tea. But that didn't stop me from tasting it and verifying if it was tea or not. But he told me that if you go hiking, up in the mountains above where that land is, that there are several, uncountable number of seedlings that probably came from that tree. That's 200 years of that tree growing and flowering and seeding every year. And, birds take the seeds, people take the seeds, and somehow the seeds end up finding their ways in other places. And then they'll germinate and start growing. And so, that could be the effect of tea spreading as well. It's not always, a human contact type of a thing. And those tea plants are the most exciting to me. The ones that have like wildly and just authentically passed along themselves. Last year I did a challenge when I was traveling through India and Nepal. I made a challenge to the tea growers there to produce a very special batch of tea, the second flush. And that batch could have just been 1 kilo. It could have just been one, just one small amount. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but I had a buyer that was interested in paying $5,000 a kilo for something special. And that buyer was just going to trust my opinion and my curation of that. And so I kind of made it into a contest. And I told everybody, especially the young guys, it was like the young men and even some of the young women, I like really like had a heart to heart with them about like, hey, this is your chance, to figure out your path to tea mastery. Focus on something, like really small and really detailed and very particular that could heighten the quality of this thing. And, I'll make sure that you get all of that money of this. If you can make a kilo of tea, that's $5,000 US for you. That's huge. And I was telling in Nepal, there are a lot of these wild seedlings. Like while you're just trekking up the mountain going from one village to the other, you'll see tea trees on the side of the road, just wild growing. They may only be like 10 to 20 years old, but they're wild growing and like complex, and you can even harvest from a single tree. That's what I told him. I said, go find these trees and like harvest your batches from a single tree. Keep that terroir so detailed that you can really hone in on the characteristic of that tea and process it into the best thing possible. So yeah, there's use for these like wild seedlings. We harvested, there was one time we were hiking and we saw like 4 very nice trees and they were flush and nice. And so we're like, hey, let's go pick and keep it all separate. Like let's do a premium pick and let's keep it all separate because no one else is going to pick this. So let's do it. And we made just a very simple white tea, just dried it, sun dried it when we got to the factory and kept everything separate. And, when we cupped those teas, oh my God, we felt like we were in the clouds, and even the tea farmers, they were drinking and they got it. I'm like, see, this is it. This is the special thing that your terroir has. It's like in the Himalayas. It's like high elevation. It's beautiful. It's pristine land. This is your special thing you got to focus in on. So Jim says that his wife's mother, born in Hilo, would pick tea at a very young age. Where would she pick the tea? She passed away when she was 93. and she was picking tea at a young age. So this was like in the early 1900s. Wait, no, this would be like in the 1930s, 1940s. Where was tea grown? I think in the 1930s and 40s, Lipton was doing their research on the Big Island then, so maybe that's what it was. I doubt she was picking this tree, because even that tree would have been huge. This 200-year-old tree I'm talking about, even that one would be huge. And it was just a single tree. So it was like as if somebody just like planted a single, germinated seed right there and was just like, okay, this is my tea tree. I'm happy. He said, oh, at home in Hilo. Okay, so she had tea there in Hilo. That makes sense. Tea's happy in Hilo. Hilo's a good place for tea. I know several nice gardens there. I wonder whatever happened to, what's her face's garden? What was her name? What was that woman's name? Starts with an S. She had moved. She moved somewhere in the Pacific, I think. Vanuatu, or I forget what that's called. But she had a nice garden. She had a nice tea garden there in Hilo. She was complaining to me because she had animals. She had like goats and sheep that were just walking around. Weed eating and cutting the grass. Fertilizing as well. And she said that the USDA came in and told her she couldn't have that. Jim, I'm sure you know all about that. Unsanitary to have animals walking around your... So yeah, tea was introduced in the late 1800s as like a research crop by Lipton. Yes. And so that's what I'm thinking, that maybe Jim's mom, they might have gotten plant material from that. But like this tea tree, that this 200-year-old tea tree is from at least 100 years before that. And it's also grown from seed. You know, by the time Lipton came, they probably would have been more focused on the clones. I don't know if they'd be growing from seed, because the clones are more predictable and, easier to manage. But yeah, Lipton abandoned that project almost immediately. They were like, nope, this is not going to work. They were smart enough to make that decision quickly. Because yeah, you're competing, with everybody else, from other areas where Lipton had far more influence and ability to, plant more land and exploit more labor. Maybe I shouldn't use the word exploit, because supposedly, and the stories that I've heard of colonial British tea planting, the treatment of labor was actually very respectable. That's what I've heard. And I've read that in a book, a historian, and I've also heard that directly from, elders in some of the villages that I go to when they talk. Because they always like to talk. They always like to talk about what life was like before. And Indian independence is only 70 years old. So if you're talking to an elder, it's possible that they have a connection to memories or to stories, about what plantation life was like before independence. And they all called it the Golden Age. And they said the planters understood that if they took care of the workers, that the workers would become more skilled and produce a higher quality product. But, once India got its independence, they sold all those systems to, wealthy businessmen. Indian, but of a different caste. And caste system is very important in that's interesting, Jim. I think I know who you're talking about. Someone is processing the Lipton test plot. I wonder where that was. Big Island, I suppose. That's cool. All the luck to them. I say keep with your small plot. Make your small quantities. It'll be easy enough to find the buyers for it. You're probably not going to become like a, empire building tea grower on Hawaii. I don't think you can go into any kind of agriculture in Hawaii with that intention. It just doesn't work. I mean, even whenever they had that intention and they had all the influence and the government backing to create those empires around sugar and around, I think sugar is like the main crop in Hawaii that really did it. Even that couldn't compete. Even that one couldn't continue to compete with Brazil and with Cuba and with even Florida, Hawaii is a good place for high quality. Small quantity, high quality of life, non-empire building. Yeah, it's just, it's a special place though. I'm so happy I got to talk about Hawaii. It's been a while. I'm missing it. I haven't been there for like a year and a half. I went in October, Halloween of 19. It's the last Halloween. No, Halloween of 18, right? Yeah. It was a good time. I did not go to the Big Island. Last time I went to the Big Island was last time I saw you, Jim. That was in the year prior to that. That was a nice time. It was good to see what you have going on, Jim. I think that's the perfect size. Like quarter acre, half acre, maybe, maybe over time as you develop skill and you develop, the confidence to be able to scale it beyond half an acre, then, maybe go bigger. But I think, like these intentions of creating, mass production is just doesn't fit. It's like trying to fit, the shape into the wrong hole, It just doesn't work. But yeah, I've been chatting on for over an hour now. I probably should go get some work done. I've been live streaming a lot today. Well, earlier this morning, that wasn't a live stream. That was definitely. But that conversation, I'll put the link to. That conversation is still available for purchase. You can purchase the recording of it, and I highly recommend it because it was an incredible conversation. Related to what I've been talking about today, but, coming from a different perspective, mostly, the story of Chinese tea and of the colonization of Chinese tea, by its own country, not by these foreign powers, but by its own country, its own government, trying to do what it thinks it's best for these people and this like heritage, of tea trees, a lot of ancient tea trees being destroyed still to this day, being destroyed for the sake of cash, other crops that will return the money immediately. So I am just putting the link to where you can purchase the replay of that video. So if you are interested in seeing that, and that included Ray from Grass People Tree out of UK, and Linda Louie from, I didn't post to Facebook, let me go post it there. Linda Louie from Bana Tea Company out of LA, she specializes in pu'er tea, as well as Lisa C, and she is incredible. It did go. I am going to recommend her book. If you haven't read it, you should read it, and it's called The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane. It was published a few years ago, 3 years ago, I think, maybe 4 years ago. And I just read it yesterday. I know, it's bad. But it's okay too. Everything happens for a reason. But her book is a fiction story, with fictional characters, really great poetic storytelling, great storytelling. But it's all told in the context of modern Chinese tea business and tea dynamics, focusing on the ethnic minority Aka people of Nanoshan, which is actually the people, that we support. The Li family, they're Aka. And it was really cool to read her book and because like my only experience has been in person when I've gone there and stayed at their home and eaten food with them and kind of understood their customs, understanding that it's very different than, the rest of the communities of China I've interacted with. But to read the book, getting like a much deeper understanding of the unique culture there compared to the rest of the China was really good. But there's like a whole bunch of background information about how the industry works, even about tea processing, about tea culture and the tea market, and how Yunnan itself like pretty much went from, ancient tea trees passed down lineage of families and families and families, similar to, like the Arunachal Pradesh story I was saying earlier in India, to, this communist system where these ancient tea trees have no value because, like their plantation gardens were yielding far more. And at that time, the government was supporting a much more commodity-minded distribution system and business goal than this like artisanal craft. And so, just 30 years ago, it was a very poor place. Yunnan was a very poor place. No electricity, no infrastructure, and very low wages for the tea that was brought to the government collection centers to like in such a short period of time. And this had nothing to do with government involvement. I mean, I think that there have been a couple of different government involvements, but it was for the most part supported and directed by the market. The consumer created the demand, which then created the market opportunity and created the opportunity for these communities to reconnect with their roots and find value in the market for that. So it's a good story. And it's something that, if that could have happened just in the past 30 years, this is something that we can see happening, even in the short-term future of other, tea growing regions that are struggling, such as India, Nepal, even Bangladesh, So, yeah, check out that panel. It's good. She'll be distributing, the recorded video on Monday. And then you can also check out that book, Lisa C's book. If you haven't picked it up, I'm highly recommending it. The Tea Girl on Hummingbird Lane. Very good book. All right, I'm going to go. Thank you so much for joining me today. And let me get a little political. It was a little fun. And I got to talk about Hawaii, so that's good. It's all good. It was a good day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I am going to take a stab again at my Constitution Study Group. I'm actually trying to hit up the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes tomorrow. And then Thursday, we're doing Tea Talks with Sam. And what I want to do for this week's Tea Talks is like have an extension of this panel conversation. So if you are interested, if you attended the panel this morning and you thought it was inspirational and you wanted to talk more on it, we'll be having like a casual, tea gathering with Tea Talks, and you can sign up for that at this link. So you don't miss it, because it's a different link than this bit.ly link that I have here. It's different than that. Sam hosts it in a different place. So if you just visit this link, you can get to the Tea Talks sign up and get there, and we can talk more about the importance of cultural lineage and anti-colonialism in tea and the communities around tea. So, yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great evening. Pure aloha.